We're going to react to some of the most explosive and fastest athletes in the entire world, and we're going to start right now. This is from the 2024 Olympics. Okay, so some of this stuff here that we're going to be looking at is footage that I took when I got into Paris and I got to see what some of the most explosive athletes do. Okay, so when we're talking about throwers and the 5 throwers that I had at the Olympics this past year, we had 5 throwers at the Olympics in Tokyo. So this is the second straight Olympics that I've been able to get to. One of the biggest things that I like to do is look at how the different athletes warm up. And this is athletes that are running, 10K all the way up to the marathon, even running behind Sifan Hassan. And then looking at how athletes like sprinters, jumpers, throwers tend to warm up, tend to practice, tend to visualize, tend to execute high speed movements. Okay, so in this specific case, I wanted to go over to the triple jump. I was fortunate enough, and I'm still fortunate enough, that one of my closest friends in track and field, many people out there refer to him as my business husband or my work husband. Actually, Thea Lafon refers to him as my work husband, is that I'm able to work alongside someone who is arguably one of the greatest coaches in the entire world, and that's Aaron Gadsden. Okay, so I was walking around the track. This is when we were able to get inside. We were able to walk around and just see what the place looks like, right? And so I wanted to walk over to the triple jumpers. I wanted to see Aaron. Thea was ready to jump in a couple of days, and I was able to see what they're doing. And the reason why I wanted to do this is that I wanted to look at the speed that these individuals have on the runway, the ability for them to hit precise points and their takeoff, and then how as coaches we can take this, looking at triple jumpers, okay, looking at long jumpers, and then transfer that into the realm of sports performance. So we're going to look at some of the coolest footage here that I think that I have ever gotten. If we are looking at the way the runway is set up right now, and I know it's not the actual best footage, but the way that we're looking at this is that we have the women's board set up here currently. Okay, so the women were in the process of jumping, and you can see here and even here you can hear the amount of force that these individuals are putting into the ground. They're trying to accelerate, okay, when they're on the runway. If you think about what the purpose of triple jump is that they're trying to accelerate as quickly as possible, get to a high speed. And actually you can see in this video here, Thea's starting to lay out some of her footwork there. She's got the green shirt on, okay, over to our right, on screen to our right. So you can see how fast they get to a very high speed. And then what that looks like as they approach the board, there's a little bit of deceleration as they approach the board. And then once they hit the board, what that hip position looks like, what's that foot position look like, what's that knee position look like at takeoff. So let's go in and look at some of these actual videos and what that force looks like, what that force sounds like, and then how we can apply that to overall training. Okay, so we can see here, this dude here about to approach, I think is actually an 18-meter guy. Let's go back and just listen to that, right? So let's go back. And you can just hear that, right? And I think like that rhythm, the rhythm. Okay, so some of these guys, they're not hitting the board, right? But they're accelerating. And it's interesting even, gosh, this is crazy. It's interesting even watching some of the guys in the background and what they're doing, how they're sort of like mimicking the rhythm, the timing. And so I want to pause it there, because some of the stuff that I see that from triple jump that I think carries over really well to a sport like football, sport like soccer, sport like basketball, is that it's high speed, but then there's a takeoff, okay? And there's a pretty substantial change of direction. And the takeoff is going to be a longer time frame of force output. Okay, so the time frame gets extended, and then the hips will then elevate because they go from this momentum on the system that is going to be completely horizontal, and they have to change that. Okay, so the difference here, or the big aspect here that we can learn is, okay, what kind of training are they doing that is jump specific? Okay, What kind of training are they doing that is resistance based, specific? And then I like to look at body type. Okay. So some of the big factors is also when they're doing those jump specific, training tools or training aspects, what's the volume? And then where can we take that for a normal sport or like basketball, like football, where the body type is not similar to triple jump? Okay. And typically what I tend to see is we might see a reduction of about 30 to 50% of total jumps. Because body mass is going to be typically a bit heavier, a bit larger, and we don't want to have some type of substantial injury. The next thing is like when I talk to someone like Thea. So Thea went on the day after this video, she went on to actually win the Olympics. Okay, so when she became the Olympic champion, she jumped 15:03 on that specific jump. But fortunately, because I have a good relationship with Aaron and we talk all the time, we want to get him on the podcast and we go over all these things. I've spent a lot of time around he and Thea. I know Thea can power clean like 90 kilos for a triple at an extraordinarily high speed of velocity, like 1.9 meters per second, something crazy. And she's only weighing about 60 kilos. So then we can take that information and say, okay, if we have, the best triple jumper in the entire world for the women, and we know that she is pound for pound absurdly strong in the weight room, but also she's extremely fast, we can say, okay, how many hops is she doing in a session? How many jumps is she doing in a session? And then identify, okay, if I'm looking at how many hops, I like to think about that as lower intensity work. So hops work versus jumps work, which I think is more high intensity. Jumps for me would be single leg bounce. Hops would be single leg mini hurdle hops that are just trying to establish a rhythm. And I think that's the biggest aspect that I learned from spending time on the runway is that there's a lot of time developing the rhythm of the approach. There's a lot of time developing the rhythm of the takeoff before they really turn on full throttle. And I think that that's something that we can really take away is that there is an aspect of speed work that we should be doing at least once a week. That's what we do inside of Peak Strength. That's how we've programmed our actual sprint training inside of the app. So if you guys need help with your training, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. We actually have warm-ups specifically to start to establish that rhythm. Then we get into the actual speed-based work to try and increase that speed and that overall locomotion. And then we have that technical component. And that's something that I literally learned directly from the jumps world, is that if we're trying to establish a rhythm, now the athlete has better feel of their overall execution. Once they have better feel, okay, then you can turn on the overarching force and the overarching output from their neural drive. And I think that as coaches in the strength world, as coaches in the performance world, where we might have football players that we're having specific opponents, we have large body mass that they're going up against, we have to be able to deduce, okay, if we have an athlete that weighs 230 pounds, we're not going to be able to have the same jumps volume, but we still can have the same type of system. We can still have a relative system based off of body mass. And so that's some of the big takeaways that I had, is like, when we're drawing out all of these things, we need to establish rhythm, we need to establish technique, we need to establish intensity, and all of those governors will play into everything. So let's get back to this. And you can see the women there on the left. If I remember, I think he might have gotten fourth at the Olympics there. This is actually Grant Fisher warming up. He actually got, I think, third in the 10K the next day from here. And this, I wanted to film this part, actually. I know this has nothing to do with jumps, but I did want to film that because it reminds me so much of some of the garage strength warm-up. So I was like, oh, shoot. It's one of the best distance runners in the entire world doing pretty similar stuff here for us. What we're doing, just getting that entire system rolling. Okay, let's get back on the runway. This is some more speed stuff. Okay, so this is, I want to show a specific example, and this is where, playing around with jump complexes, playing around with jump series, and then thinking through sports like wrestling, sports like even throwing to a point. If you notice on the individual who is actually on the runway here, he's changing his shin angle pretty substantially. And this is where we can see like using a false step will come into play for football. Okay, but in this case, he's going from a double leg. Okay, so he's got double leg contact into a single leg position. Now, I tried to video this multiple times, but I kept sort of screwing this up. One of the reasons why I love exercises like this for sports performance is because it's a little bit easier for someone who lives outside of the jumps world. And I think that if we can comprehend that the sports that transfer best to locomotive field sports, the outside sports are going to be triple, long, probably the 60 meter, those sports. And then if you look at somebody who's going to have more contact, I would say throwing transfers really well to a sport like football with offensive and defensive linemen. So I wanted to video this for us to be able to see it's a little bit less intense and it's a little bit easier because of that for somebody who's in a field sport to be able to execute. So let's check this out. Set this up. Double, single, single, and it's like the control of the arm swings as well. And that's a really, really important concept when we're teaching young kids how to jump. That's a big takeaway. A lot of times we're not educating the athletes on how to ground. A lot of times we're not educating the athletes on how to arm swing, how to change their trunk position. Those are all key concepts. So when we're studying other sports, when we're studying the most explosive athletes in the world, we have to look at their training volume. We have to look at things like body mass. We have to compare that to other sports relative to what they're doing. So high speed locomotion, like in the triple jump or the long jump, being able to decelerate but then take off rapidly, and then react quickly. And then we break that down further into what are their grounding mechanics, because these are the best grounders. As weird as that sounds, they're the best grounders in the entire world. What are their grounding mechanics? What are their takeoff mechanics? Take those and recognize that a kid in 8th or 9th grade may never get to that point. If we can teach them proper trunk position, if we can teach them arm swings, if we can teach them how to ground after coming down from a rebound, that's going to improve their overall sports performance. So that's what I wanted to share here, was how we can look at other sports in other realms, learn from their training, learn from their training preparation and their situations, and then advance that into our overall thought process. And that's exactly what we do here at Garage Strength. We go to places like the Olympics. We go to the World Championships. We take all of this information. I'm looking at how they're moving. I'm understanding their concepts. I'm talking with their coaches, and I'm trying to implement this directly into peak strength so that we can help you guys attain those goals. Because remember, freaks, if you want to become a champion, you've always got to cultivate your power. Peace.